Abdur Kul Shah Yuat Biyuah Samus Shil Timta. Begin all things by first using the all. This is Ayoka Yotamayat with White Female Challenge number 7, IMF World Bank Challenge. I'm going to read the response to questionnaire to Indigenous Peoples Organization on the 10th month, 18th day, 71st year of the Yamasa calendar, which is December 31st, 2016 of the Gregorian calendar. Our assessment of the IMF and the World Bank collaboration with the United Nations is nothing short of genocide, infanticide, apartheid, crimes against humanity, war crimes, et al., for operating contrary to the United Nations Charter and international law. The actions of IMF and the World Bank, as well as the United Nations, is apparent and obvious as being the source of the very problems they claim they are seeking to solve. The IMF and the World Bank, as well as the United Nations, who fronts for the Rothschilds, are conspirators, collaborators, colluders, and accessories to genocide, infanticide, rape, forced assimilation, fratricide, apartheid, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and all other international law, treaties, and conventions that they sign in support of. The IMF and the World Bank, as well as the United Nations, who fronts for the Rothschilds, are guilty of violating all the laws, treaties, and conventions of the United Nations and international law as proven by the following evidence. We economic hitmen have really been the ones responsible for this first truly global empire, and we work many different ways. But perhaps the most common is that we will identify a country that has resources that our corporations covet, like oil, and then arrange a huge loan for that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. But the money never actually goes to the country. Instead, it goes to our big corporations to build infrastructure projects in that country, power plants, industrial parks, ports, things which benefit a few rich people in that country, in addition to our corporations, but really don't help the majority of people at all. However, those people, the whole country, is left holding huge debt. It's such a big debt they can't repay it, and that's from the plan. If they can't repay it, and so at some point the economic hitmen go back to them and say, listen, you owe us a lot of money. Can't pay your debt, so sell your oil. Real cheap to our oil companies, allow us to build a military base in your country or send troops in support of ours to some place in the world like Iraq, or vote with us on the next UN vote to have their electric utility company privatized and their water and sewage system privatized. That's sold to U.S. corporations or other multinational corporations, so that it's whole mushrooming thing, and it's so typical of the IMF and the World Bank work. They just put a country in debt. It's such a big debt, they can't pay it, and then you offer to refinance that debt and pay even more interest, and you demand this quid pro quo, which you call a conditionality or good governance, which means basically they get to sell off their resources, including many of their social services, their utility companies, their school systems, sometimes their penal systems, their insurance systems to foreign corporations. So it's a double, triple, quadruple whammy. John Perkins, former chief economist for Chastity Main Inc., author of Confessions of an Economic Hitman. There are two ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by the sword, the other is by debt. John Adams, 1735 to 1826. The IMF, the World Bank, and the United Nations, under the hand of the Rothschild banking cartel, are guilty, active actors, willing participants, aiders, abettors, and accessories of global slavery. This does not apply to Black/African American, African American, African Canadians, Afro Caribbeans, Afro Latinos, etc., because the aforementioned categories have no standing at law, domestically and internationally, and is not recognized in law. Civiliter mortuus, civilly dead, dead in the view of the law. Black, African American, African American, African Canadians, Afro-Caribbeans, Afro-Latinos, etc. are not entitled to human rights, indigenous rights, or any other kind of rights. The IMF, World Bank, and the United Nations knows this international legal fact. The IMF, the World Bank, and the United Nations, under the hand of the Rothschilds banking cartel, are guilty of genocide, apartheid, fratricide, infanticide, trafficking in human cargo, human rights violations, crimes against humanity, rape, forced assimilation, and war crimes against the entire planet of indigenous and autochthonous peoples. People who are persons, individuals, and corporations are artificial fictions, also known as fictions of law. This means they do not exist. Those who are artificial fictions of law operating as a corporation with benefits from corporations and not distinguishing corporate existence from natural flesh and blood existence are indeed property of the Vatican, Holy See, the Jesuits, the Rothschild central bank system, those central banks connected to it, IMF, World Bank, and as such, no crimes or violations of international law apply to persons, individuals, and corporations because the aforementioned are considered artificial and do not exist. Abu Gadur, Abu Gadur, Abu Gadur. White power, white power, white power.